All right, guys, it's 3:04. We'll not trying to repeat what we went through last time. This is just.
Where's the commissioner? Is he not going to be here today?
No, I don't know. I gave him all the information, but I'll have to talk with him. Which did let you guys know, if you didn't see the email, Josh Sawyer is going to be the new representative of the Board of Commissioners versus Roy Brownlow. Roy's got a full-time job. He just did not have the time to devote to this. Last meeting, we were able to go through our existing code, get some Q&A on that. One item that I was not able to cover in that meeting is we do have a portion of our code in the dunes and veg portion that basically says, and it's very broadly written, 2 feet of fill, you're required, a sealed document from engineer, it will not negatively impact the adjacent property owner. It does not, some folks have interpreted it as if there's a elevation of the lot 2 feet or more, it doesn't say that, it's 2 feet of fill. So essentially, if you bring a dump truck load, that requires that engineer. So that is something for this group to consider, ways of clarifying how we should look at that with the potential impact. Because if someone's bringing, and I'm going to use what we were talking about earlier, Ethan, if someone's bringing in a load of fill for a landscape bed that at the time of it dropping off is 2 feet, by code, you got to let us know that it's not going to impact your adjacent property owner. So that is one thing under our current rules and regulations that we should, this group should take a look at. And
can we talk about that right now?
Sure, we can certainly talk about it. I
was here when that rule came into effect.
Okay.
And how it was explained to us when we were building houses, if you were use the natural dirt on the lot, okay, and you moved it around on the lot, that was fine to do that.
That's correct.
If you brought in fill from off the island or somewhere else, and you raised the lot more than 2 feet, you had to have an engineer plan. That's the way that was always talked about in the.
That explanation makes logical sense, but that's not how the code is written. The code is written, if you bring in 2 feet of fill, you got to have an engineered plan. And it's rippled. When we have conversations with some accept it. Oh yeah, we'll go ahead and do it.
So are you saying one load of fill kicks you into the engineered plan?
So a simple, if that is what this group would like the code to say is, if it elevates the overall lot 2 feet or more, then it requires a stormwater plan. But it just says if you bring in 2 feet of fill.
Yeah, I mean, because for a pad on a house, I mean, it's going to take you to fill 2 feet. It's going to take you 40, 50 loads of dirt.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not talking about one load of dirt.
But what the code is saying is if there's any area on the lot that is measured vertically, that's 2 foot of fill or more, it requires an engineer. So it doesn't, the code doesn't specify if it's a surface area of 50 foot, 100 foot, 10,000 square feet. It is just, if anywhere is greater than 2 foot, which in my opinion doesn't make a lot of sense if somebody's filling in a very small hole or a building pad that, you know, the majority of the pad is level and you have to bring in 5 loads of dirt to fill one section that is 2 foot 1 inch. You know, it's not negatively impacting anybody. You know, the pad's going to be the pad's going to be the pad. No matter if the house was built on pylons and underneath the house is left virgin, the roof area is still there. So I get the point that it's trying to minimize adverse effects off site, but just adding a planter box that's 32 inches high would require a letter.
By
It's-
code, yeah. And
By code, which
that-
is
I don't think
crazy.
that's the intent
Yep.
of the code. I think what Billy's saying is accurate on that, but for whatever reason, they didn't write it that way. They just left it broadly written to where, and I'll say this quite often, I could sit there, read something, have interpretation. You could read the same thing, have interpretation.
That's right.
They contradict each other, but we're both right.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it falls on the personnel to, hey, this is where I have to interpret it, and this is what it's got to be.
Yeah.
I like, when I write, every time I've written codes in my career, I do my best to keep the gray out of it. Black and white, so anybody can pick it up, read it, and say, okay, well, that makes sense. I know what I've got to follow.
Yeah.
And that's what I think that portion of our code needs some wordsmithing
Yeah.
to make it follow that. I mean, that concept, is everybody agreeable on the 2 feet of fill elevation of the entire property, or?
No, I think, I mean, you could date any section of the property if you change the elevation. You could impact a neighbor. It doesn't have to be the whole lot.
Okay.
And even 2 foot, I think, is a lot, because you could change the grade by 1 foot over 20 feet, let's say, the one side of the front yard, and cause drainage to move in that direction towards your neighbor's house.
Yeah, but how are you
It's-
going to
it's a-
determine if somebody has changed something 2 feet? I mean, I've built 350 houses over here with my brothers,
Wow.
and you cannot, every lot, you're going to change somewhere on that elevation of that lot 2 feet. So what you're saying is, every lot has to be engineered because you're grading the lot. I mean,
Well, I think,
that's what you're,
The
that's kind of
code-
what you're saying. I mean, it's,
the code now is saying, it's a catch-all. It's saying, we'll write the code and it's vague, so anything that's in question gets reviewed. Doesn't mean it's gonna be an action plan, just means it's, it errs on the side of being overcautious versus being undercautious. And I think a code probably should, what we're facing with stormwater management is we want to almost guarantee that we don't make anything worse for a neighbor, adjacent property, or it could be somebody 6 houses down the street if that street is a downward slope. I think we have to look at it as holistic. Hate to, planter box, extreme example. Certainly the code is not trying to mandate planter box placement and elevation.
But if we put a holistic approach on it, that anywhere on the lot, if it's filled over 12 inches, then that's what you get. So there has to be a line drawn in the sand that is reasonable and takes action. We can't say that, if the lot's touched, that you have to have a engineered plan, because we already went through that one time, and every one of the town was divided in half, and every one of the folks that were developing were against, and everybody that does not develop was for it. So, obviously the town is divided, so we have to come to somewhere in the middle. And, just because a lot's graded doesn't mean that it needs to have an engineer to state that it's graded properly. There's other sections of the code that state that you have to retain the 2 inches of stormwater on your site from all impervious areas. So, like Atlantic Beach doesn't allow any fill within 5 foot of the property line. That could be something that we can incorporate with our ordinance, so that, within 5 foot of the property lines, there's no negative impacts from lot fill.
yeah, but that's going to affect septic tanks. I mean, that's going to affect everything. I mean, you got to
100%.
watch what you change. I mean, there's
Yeah, we gotta be-
so many different things that you're talking about that you don't know what you're changing. I think the rule was, if you don't go in there and add any fill to that lot, and you use the natural fill on the lot to prepare your lot before you build, you should be able to just do a 2-inch stormwater plan, just like we've always done. If you're gonna add 2 foot of elevation to the lot or to the building pad after you get finished with your natural fill, then yes, I agree that you need to have an engineered plan. But if you use the natural soil, which is there, which is perfect, and it sucks in all the rain, it does everything that it's supposed to do, it's perfect sand on this beach, okay? You're not dealing with the clay like you deal with in Raleigh. You're not dealing with stuff that you deal with in Cape Carteret. Most of the lots on this beach are perfect sand. So it's gonna infiltrate into the ground. You're able to get a septic tank on these lots. So that's telling you that you have 1 foot of separation with any of your water to be able to get a septic tank on your lot. And I just think you need to kind of leave it. That's how it was when the people built your house. And this island does not have a stormwater problem. This island has a groundwater problem. And if you read the study that the engineers did on this, the stormwater from Ronnie Watson's office to the point, if you read that study, it tells you that the groundwater comes out of the ground when there's a hurricane or when there's a heavy rainfall or if it rains all winter. It comes right out of the ground. So, I mean, you're making these people come in here and do these engineered stormwater plans when all they really need to do is what we've been doing. I mean, if you can show us where the problem that we're having problem with stormwater is because of the houses, it's not because of the houses, it's because the water is coming out of the ground. And I don't know if you have read the study, but it tells you. Are you guys familiar with the study from Greenville that the guy did?
I read,
I mean,
didn't memorize it, but
I do want to clarify one thing. So that fill rule does not, if you're just moving dirt on the property, it does not come into effect. It's just when you bring in fill. So we haven't changed that. That it specifically says when you bring it in fill, 2 feet of fill, that's when it triggers. And again, the way it's written, it just.
So do you need to add something where if you're bringing in 2 foot of fill for the house site and the driveway, you have to do that? Or, I mean, just a load of fill on a lot is kind of it wouldn't be.
It won't take much to get 2 feet.
Yeah, that's what I think we're all on the same page.
That's where the
with that.
debate
That's
is.
what we're saying. We're saying that if you're filling one spot 2 foot, that's 10 square feet, I think we can all agree there's gonna be no adverse effects to anybody. That's what we're saying. But where does that line get drawn in the sand? Is it 100 square feet of area that gets lifted 2 feet? Is it 250? Is it 500? Is it 1,000? Like what?
and
You
the
know,
answer is it depends on the lot. Depends on what you're working with to start with. Because every lot's different. And how you use it, and where you use it. I think it's hard to mandate a prescriptive solution when there's so much variety or volatility lot to lot. I thought while you were talking, I thought what happens if you get a lot that's low in the front but has a dune in the back?
That's how every lot on this beach is. I mean, it's a maritime
Yeah,
forest.
but you could move the dune in the back to elevate the overall lot 2 feet.
Yeah,
And not be affected, the code wouldn't apply.
Yeah, 'cause
So there are loopholes and, I mean,
Well, you have to do that to be able to level the lot.
yeah,
I mean, you're building a
But-
home, building a septic
you-
system, these things have to be leveled.
but you, sure,
You can't build on a hill.
but you could elevate the lot overall by 2 feet by taking the dune and leveling it.
No, but the average, if you take that average, it's kind of like a roof, okay? When you have a roof that's 40 foot tall, you take the mean average of the lot, okay? When you measure a roof, and if the lot is kind of sloped a little bit, then you're taking the mean average in there. when you go to a lot and you're grading a lot, and you have a hill in the back and you have a lower area in the front to level it, the whole average is coming down, okay? It's not gonna be going up. I mean, it's.
That's true,
You gotta
mathematically.
think about that. I mean, these lots,
Mathematically, that's true.
these lots are not that big. I mean, I build the same house over and over and over. The house is about 2,100 square feet, okay? So when you buy a lot, that's 12,500 feet, all right? First thing you do is you take off 35%. And then you build your pad of where you're gonna put your house, okay, which is 1,100 square feet. And you're gonna put in a driveway, you're gonna put in a septic system, and then you're trying to leave 35% natural around that. And now we're putting in for the stormwater. The time we get finished, and I'm only building a 2,000 square foot house, there's no room on those lots. And I hear what you're saying about it needs to be maybe engineered, but there's no room to add more things if an engineer wants to add more. I mean, it's been working. It's been working for a lot of years. And I don't know, I don't think that, just don't make it too strict.
I think one thing that would help a lot of this with stormwater is putting a built-upon area limit on the town as a whole to mimic what CAMA requires. And that would really stop some of the interior lots producing maximum amounts of runoff.
Oddly enough, we haven't got to that point, but, you know, Commissioner Brownlow did put together an innovative stormwater ordinance, and that's one of the things he's trying to replicate with all of his years at DCM, creating a built-upon area limitation. And it makes logical sense, I mean.
Yeah, I mean, right now, like in a subdivision that's in the 575, everything in the 575 on the sound by CAMA is 25% or less. So that's already taken care of.
Yeah.
If the town was due like 30%, 30% impervious, I think kind of Cape Carbon is 30%, then you have to have a plan. I don't know if it's an engineered plan, but you gotta have a plan.
Okay.
I can see that. I mean, if
Yeah.
somebody wanted to go over 30%, you know, there has to be a time in there where you throw that in there, because you're getting a lot larger homes and things like that on smaller lots. We have a lot of lots in this town. You don't realize it. They are 7,000 feet. They're 9,000 feet. They're very small, where the trailers and stuff are. And with the way the rules are now, I mean, the increments just, they take care of themselves, because you can't build that much on them.
Yeah.
And if you throw a rule in there out of these AEC or whatever areas, it will take care of it. I mean, it will.
That's a good segue. Let's take a look at what Commissioner Brownlow did put together for us. Please keep in mind, he took this upon himself. I mean, nobody instructed him to do it. He just wanted to do this for the town.
Can I go back to one thing though on that
Yeah,
filter?
sure.
Did you all come up with something that we can maybe recommend? Or what are we doing in here? Are we trying to recommend things or?
So ultimately, yeah, recommend adjustments to our code to, you know, make sense.
Okay.
I'm trying to, for the life of me, it's been a while since I've read through that innovative stormwater draft ordinance he put together. He may have something in there that covers that.
Covers the 2-foot filter.
The 2-foot fill.
Okay.
But if not, yeah, that is something that we need to recommend adjustments, if that is the pleasure of this committee. Now, keep in mind, whatever you guys recommend goes to the planning board first and then the board of commissioners. So there's still, you know, just the scrutiny on that, so. But that's up to you guys. my intent today is to finish all the documents to start us off.
Okay.
And then we say, all right, Chris, we've heard everything. We like this, we don't like that. We think the town should consider these next steps. And one thing, and I was going to kind of talk about this later on in the presentation, but now's the best time as any. It was suggested to site visits. I think we need to try to schedule it. I'm going to see if we can schedule site visits for our next meeting. Give you guys that visual on what we're contending with, on what's out there. Some of these, you know, give a good example on Ridge Road. There's this lot that will be developed, but it's just the oddest looking lot. It looks like a creek bed when you walk it. But if environmental health issues a permit for it, it will be developed. And it'll further block where that water just stands in that back part of it. You got Sound Drive on this side, you got Archer's Creek on this side, and it just comes in there, so. But just yet to answer your question, yes,
Okay.
kind of keep that as we go through the rest of these documents. Excuse me. So what you have on the screen is just some items that Commissioner Brownlow did put into his innovative stormwater ordinance draft. Let's see, so general 30% impervious restrictions. Properties with less than 35% of naturally occurring vegetation shall be limited to 25% impervious coverage. Stormwater plans, stormwater administrator has discretion to require, oh good God, I can't spell, engineered plan for development exceeding 10,000 square feet and involves more than 30% impervious coverage. Flood prone area, anything in the floodplain is limited to 25% impervious coverage. There's retention standards, they push for best management practices, so that kind of gets into your on-site above grade retention areas, rain gardens, some low impact development style, but also looks at specific conditions, new development. Again, I do apologize. When I update presentations, I will limit what's going to go on there because I didn't realize how small that will be. All right, so that's the little rundown. This was designed with the intent to have Mr. Brownlow here, and I'm sure he's more than willing to attend if you guys want him to kind of explain his methodologies of putting this together. But this was intended to be just that broad brush, and you know, he could describe it further. But the concept still is very similar to what you were talking about, Ethan, as far as let's just limit the built upon area townwide. He's got something very similar to that concept there.
Yeah, and I agree with Billy that if somebody wants to build something larger, maybe put a standard in there that if you want to go over 30% and then put a cap on it so that you can't go over 40% or 35%, really you're not going to get much more than 40% anyways on the smaller lots. But the larger lots, you could definitely see something, encroaching the 40 to 45% BUA limit. Anything from 0 to 30 wouldn't require a your plan, 30 to 40 or 30 to 45 or 42. We could research to see what kind of numbers really make sense.
Okay.
But that number would be something that an engineer could get involved in, do some different design techniques that would, capture stormwater, and maybe even instead of doing the 2-inch storm, like a basic plan, you could say you got to meet the state's 1 year, 24-hour pre-post and let them do a design on it versus just this infiltration, more along the lines of the 10,000 square foot large development, you know, go through and actually do a design, so you have a infiltration rate from a soil scientist, and you need to follow the stormwater control measures.
Okay.
Instead of just doing like a one-size-fits-all, hey, just the engineer shows, you know, a volume and that's it. Actually go in and, you know, make sure that you're meeting a higher standard.
Well, in that coastal stormwater rule, correct me if I'm wrong, that's been averaging about a 3.5-inch retention.
Yep. And we wouldn't have to put that, you know, in our code. We could just say the 1 year, 24-hour storm event and leave that up to the designer to go to NOAA's webpage to grab that, because then it can fluctuate up and down.
Okay.
Are you saying that once a year, we have 24 hours, we have a 3.5-inch?
No, that's not what, no, NOAA has, that's a whole different hydraulics. You would take classes and classes on that, NC State School Engineer, to understand what that means. NOAA puts together rainfall curves and data based on the average chance of it occurring. The 1 year 24 doesn't mean that you're gonna have one time a year 3.5-inch storm. It's a percentage of a timeline. But that is just what they call, how they define the depth of the rainfall for a 1 year 24-hour event on NOAA's website. NOAA, NOAA's website.
Yeah, and so what that is part of the general statute for coastal stormwater rules. If you're within half a mile of shellfish waters and you're disturbing, is it an acre or more, or 10,000 square feet or more?
10,000 square foot of built upon area, or an acre or more of disturbance.
Yeah, so that's when the state code comes in play on that. Typically with our lots are so small, you're not gonna get that. But it's roughly the same concept, you know. We're considering the average rainfall in Emerald Isle just for code development purposes. You got a 2-inch rainfall, that's your average. They look at just that more data-driven, based off what NOAA provides as far as data to determine on average, you know, it's been in place for almost 15 years now.
It's been
Yeah, and it
longer.
seems to fluctuate around that 3.5. I've seen it down to 3. I've seen it, you know, so it just depends on the location, the soils, but it is this holistic approach on it. But it's not it's a very detailed approach. So that's where the state capped it. All right, look, we're only requiring it in coastal counties. And so the 20 counties are included in this. And it only kicks in when this type of built upon area is proposed. So basically, some of these larger developments, commercial developments, they're likely to require, I would imagine when Publix was built, that had to have a state stormwater permit.
And they require that at 12% or greater.
Correct.
And NOAA's current 1 year, 24 hours, 3.67. Current.
So that certainly is a possibility. Set like, you know, if your built upon area is at this percentage or higher, then you have to do this. So
Is there a built-upon percentage, like 25% or something on the oceanfront also now? Or is it just on the sound and the 575
I believe CAMA has a restriction of 30%
on the ocean?
on the ocean hazard area. But it's only on the ocean hazard area. So like if you're doing work on property, second row property on Ocean Drive, that's likely out of the ocean hazard area. You get closer to the Indian Beach side, there may be this overlap of the ORW from
The sound.
Bogue Sound,
Yeah.
but it just, you know, it's that whole first line
Yeah.
measuring anywhere between 60 feet to 120 feet, depending on the square footage of the house on that, so, yeah.
So some of these things are already taken care of.
Yeah.
We really don't have to worry about them.
Yeah, and look at the success. I mean, CAMA's been doing that, again, with those same 20 counties. those restrictions on the waterfront property that seems to be successful. So that could be just that
Yeah.
logical.
Yeah, because when you get a state stormwater permit, like the one for Sunset Landing,
Mhm.
we're under 25%, because you gotta have the roads and everything in there.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, we're at like 20% maybe.
And that still is, when we talk about potential adjustments on the code, that's something that this group needs to
Yeah.
definitely consider, because the way the code's written, it's just, I like, Atlantic Beach has it straightforward. It says if you're in a subdivision with a state stormwater permit, you're exempt from this portion of the code.
Yeah.
Because there is that same state level of scrutiny that goes into those designs, so.
Yeah.
Any other questions on that?
Nope.
Okay. So, Billy, you brought up the project over there with Michael Cisco. So this was one of the things that has been brought up. We do have copy, if anybody wants to see it. I think I emailed everybody a copy of it, but we also have it available on our website if you want to download it. This is a thesis presented to faculty at the Department of Geology Science at East Carolina under the direction of Alex Manda. The date on the study is May 2013. And you see the hypothesis that there was two hypotheses that the gentleman used on the paper. And essentially, several structural best management practices presented as alternative measures to reduce stormwater runoff, including bioretention, level spreader vegetation, filter strips, and trenches are essentially what's recommended. Just, you don't have to overthink it. These are just practices that can be used to help contain that 2-inch, for right now for Emerald Isle, that 2-inch rainfall. Now, I think it's very important to point out, above 2 inches is considered act of God. So if there is that flow from one to the other and it exceeds 2 inches, that goes against the code as far as it limits our restrictions. And that's just kind of a correspondence between neighbors on the civil, if there is ability for civil. Any questions on that?
I'll bring up one thing.
Sure.
About when you have your neighbors and stuff and you're like grading a lot next to your neighbor and there's a swell in between you and your neighbor.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think some of the problems that you have down there on Piney Street, if there would have been some kind of easement or something worked out between those people, they knew, I mean, I don't know if they knew, but somebody needed to tell them when they built those two houses that there needs to be an easement there to run the water through from across the street when it floods, because it's always gone through there. And if we could come up with some way of, when you guys are letting people build houses in these areas that are, stormwater's been there forever, that they try to get some kind of easements then, if they're gonna, maybe block the stuff.
I do not.
Billy, on that one there, we did the development on 402 and left 10 foot of the property line in the natural area on the town side of things.
Uh-huh.
So I look back at what we did. We had proposed an easement and decided against it because it was part of the 35% natural area that would be binding with the property to be undeveloped. But I don't know if they filled in. It looks really close to me, like they put in retaining walls in addition to what was originally done, and that's been filled in and not left natural.
Yeah, so there's retaining walls on either side. You got 402 and whatever the address, I guess 404 next door. So you can see it's still low enough that, the day that myself and Matt went out there and it was probably ankle deep in the middle of Piney Street, which, it does historically, that's the selling point. you could see where some of it was draining down, at least in between that. Because still, even with the retaining walls, that there's that little bit of sliver where it can find its way. But you can also see where, you know, you got a lot of these lots, houses graded this way, and the road's down here, and it's accumulating in the road, and there's nowhere for it to dissipate other than evaporation, because it's dammed up. So, but yeah, you know, to answer your question, should it be a requirement that drainage easements along the perimeter on some of these? Yeah, I mean, that's what I've been accustomed to in my career is, you know, whenever we had these big surveys, you would likely have those drainage easements in most areas, if not all lots in these developments. It's not saying you have to cut into it, but it's also providing the opportunity that if it's needed, you could.
Well, what I'm seeing is, Chris, is a lot of people will come in these areas where it's used to flood, and we built on pylons. And there wasn't anything underneath the house but a storage shed.
Yeah.
Didn't even put any driveways in.
Yeah.
And I remember there's a red duplex that they moved from the oceanfront on that street. And when they built it, they put it in there, moved it, they put it on pylons. Wasn't nothing underneath it.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know, it might be enclosed, but those areas, those people got to know that they can't enclose those houses because it's going to flood.
Yeah.
Sometime it's going to flood. And I don't know, I feel for the people, but you got to know when you're building an area like that, that you have a chance that you're going to flood. If you do build, there's ways to build where it can flood and just go in there and wash it out.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, all of, you know, the V zones and things like that. And you can build a smaller area downstairs to go up into your house and stuff, but do you build it so that you can just wash it out?
Yeah.
But
Well, I like your idea of, it falls under the concept of do no harm. If we first just say we don't want to harm or make worse the situation, you know, it should be net neutral. I mean, if we can improve on it, great, but by code, it should do no harm to your neighbor, which may involve easements or whatever is at, you know, tools are at our disposal that we could ensure the building of that structure does no harm to its neighbors. And I think if we follow that concept, kind of a preemptive strike, you know, before it becomes a problem, we put in place rules and regulations or easements and what I think I was hearing was not only is it important at the time of construction, but 5 and 10 years down the road, maintenance. So who owns the maintenance? Is it the homeowner, and can the city enforce that? Or does the city have to eventually own it? But at least the city would have the right to act should it become a problem. You know, should the water back up and become a flooding issue.
So from, you know, I'm going to answer the question as far as who has the rights to it. Typically, it's going to be the private owner of the property because it's going to be their stormwater system of some sorts. What I've seen in some of these, and it's probably a poor example because unless there's redevelopment on these mobile home lots that are just this massive parcel in and around the Sound Drive, down, let me get my orientation right, down that way, over there by the old ferry landing and all that. That'll likely go through subdivision process, and we could probably capture in that process some sort of drainage system that'll not only serve the road system, but, you know, any others. Depending on who owns the road would depend on who owns the stormwater system on that part. But if you're talking about individual lots and the system, that's going to be on that private property ownership. right now, the way the code's written, if it's one of those large-scale, 10,000 square foot or more land disturbance, it's going to be, well, it always has to be engineered, one. Then there has to be a recorded deed restriction and maintenance plan where they certify every year that it's still working as proposed. Does that kind of answer that question, or did I talk in circles?
No, I think you're hitting on some good concepts.
Okay.
And if it's already code, already, and, you know, we got a toolbox, the town has a toolbox of.
But just keep in mind, those are for the 10,000 square foot of disturbance or higher.
Which,
So-
you know, bare facts is not the problem in front of us.
Well, if you,
Future development is gonna be less than 10,000,
for the most part, yes.
90+%. I think last time someone said 98%.
Yeah, I think a large percentage of remaining lots, roughly, you know, you go on that average 12,500 square feet, 12,500 square feet. Kind of taken from you, he's got it down to, you lose 35% for natural area, that's just requirements.
Drops it below
Yeah,
10,000.
drops it below 10,000.
So the future development of Emerald Isle is below 10,000 square feet. 90+%, large majority.
As far as
Some of the-
land
some of the
land
data
disturbance.
that The data you're putting together will tell us that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we would stop theorizing, but our belief, at least right now, is that the large percent of lots left to be developed, 560 or whatever the number is below 10,000 feet. So until we address below 10,000, because that's where, you know, do no harm, do no future harm, do no harm, all development henceforward, if it's 90+% below 10,000 square feet, that's where we need to focus our
Well,
time.
now, keep in mind, though, it's not saying that there's no rules for the sub-10. We have the small residential requirements for those that you still have to show that you've got the stormwater capacity to contain 2-inch water on site. But again, those are individually owned. The town does not have the right to make corrections or anything, you know, we're going on private property.
Yeah, so that's left up to the individual,
That is.
which means we'll get all kind of results.
Yeah, well, and
And
that's,
it won't be a cohesive plan. You take an inventory of 560+ lots, and kind of, if everybody individually develops those lots, then your result is gonna be helter-skelter,
well,
because there's no consistency.
to be honest, yeah, if there's not a comprehensive plan, and that's town-wide on stormwater in general, which would not be a cheap venture, I'll be honest with you on that. It is going to be, you know, everybody, you got this list of how I can comply with the code. And, you know, Billy could do it one way, Ethan can propose something, Greg could propose, and George could propose something, and they're all, as long as it shows capacity of 2-inch rainfall on that sub 10,000 square foot of land disturbance, it meets code. But it's not all following this planned out approach, because we don't have a comprehensive stormwater plan for Emerald Isle as
Yeah,
total. Just the same as we got a comprehensive land use plan as part of our CAMA requirements. So that's where we, you know, enforce with our zoning, but that's that concept. So we're not going to have commercial in areas that are supposed to be residential and so forth and so on. So we do have that. It's created some of these overlays such as Village West, Marina. So we got all that, but we do not have a comprehensive stormwater plan for the town.
Yeah, there's a few things in the ordinance, like guidelines and stuff, that they kind of want you to follow. And when you're doing your 35% natural and things, the town would rather you basically put a buffer all the way around the lot. And that makes a lot of sense, but you see a lot of people come in there and they're just do it across the back of the lot. And then they grade from side to side, you know, so.
Which is a problem for your neighbors.
Well, it's not a
Potential-
problem for your
potential
neighbor.
problem.
If you prepare it correctly, it's not a problem. I mean, if you berm the side of your lot on both sides to
Yeah.
keep the water from going over the sides, you won't have a problem. I mean, that's what I was saying,
Do
if we
we-
can keep the people to keep the water on their own lot, then you don't have a problem with this stormwater stuff, unless water is running down through the lots, like over on Piney
Piney
Street.
and
I mean,
down, yeah.
that water has been running through those lots, and there's laws in effect that you can't block that water from going downstream. So that's why I brought it up last time, that it's a civil issue. You go in there and they find out that the water's been ponded in that area and flooding for years, and they go back and they have to take that out. I mean, it's a civil issue, and you go and you take care of it in court. But you don't want to have to do it that way.
Right.
But if you can fix it in the beginning and not let people do that, it's a lot better. But
Well, your idea of berming 3 sides, I mean, that sounds like something we should write down and remember.
well, what this stormwater plan up here is suggesting a lot of that. It's talking about putting a lot of the stormwater on top of the ground in a retention basins and things like that. And that's what I do. Ethan is an engineer. He probably puts more of his stuff underground, where I put my stuff on top of the ground. And it's very simple to do. I mean, you just make a concave in the grass, you know, a place, and you put all your stormwater right in there. And it holds it, and you mow it, and a lot of other people, though, and it's perfectly legal to put it underneath your driveway in a rock place. So there's a lot of different ways to do it. That's why
2 good ideas, but not, they are or they aren't code now.
they are. That's
They are.
what we do. I mean, that's what we've been doing for years.
If you have enough space on your lot, you can cut trenches, you can do any of that. The code is just, you have to keep 2 inches of runoff from your impervious surfaces on your property.
Yeah.
It's just what the code says.
And if you read this study and they're talking about these infiltration basins, I can't read this damn stuff's too small, but it tells you all the different ways. And the reason they're saying a lot of this in the study is the areas where they did the study, the groundwater is coming out of the ground. So if you can find a hill or if you can find an elevated place on your lot to put your stormwater, it will help in these other areas. And it makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's, as Ethan knows, he's an engineer, you're supposed to have, in a lot of areas, 2 foot of separation between your ground and stormwater, which on this island, I mean, it's very hard to get that anywhere. There's a few places you can, but it's in the beach hills. I mean, so you're talking about engineering stormwater plans. That's why we have an issue with a lot of it, because you can't engineer in a lot of these areas where the groundwater is so high unless you fill it. I mean, you go look at these places like where they're building a Walmart or they're building a big commercial area, and they go in and raise the whole area 2 foot. Most of the time, they're raising it 2 foot to get where they can do the stormwater. They have to, it's a state rule that they have to have 2 foot of separation. For septic tanks, septic systems, you only have to have 1 foot of separation. So, and it's, there's a lot to it.
There is a lot to it, and I think one thing that I think was talked about last meeting, but merits breaching again. Even on dry times, the water table on average around here is what, 1.5 to 2 inches below grade in dry times.
In a lot of areas.
So we have like a lot of rain. Good example, Debbie brought in not only its rain, but there was some storms that followed, and that just puts it right on there. And then you Yeah, when the water table gets that close to the grade, it's just going to seep up.
How many days did it take for us to get 12 inches of rain? You probably know more than anybody because you were looking at it every day.
It was about 8 days.
8 days. So we had like an inch and a half of rain a day, basically.
Yeah. We'd get bands that would come through and they'd dump an inch and a half, and then it would be 3 or 4 hours, and then it'd dump another 2 inches, and
Yeah, it was raining.
yeah.
But on that same, and just on that subject level though, we can't create code to capture that level of, because we have to create code with a reasonable amount of annual disturbance, I guess is the best way I can describe it. So these storms that will come, we are a coastal community, storms will come, nor'eastern, hurricane, tropical storm, those are that act of God that is considered. But regulatory wise, right now, it's 2 inches or less is that regulatory level.
Well, for less than 10,000 square feet, we don't require an engineered stormwater runoff plan, right?
That's correct.
Unless you have more than 2 foot of fill. If you have more than 2 foot of fill, we do require it.
All right, so I go back to lots left to be developed, or mostly under 10,000 square feet. And none of them are going to require an engineered stormwater runoff plan.
It depends.
Pardon?
It depends. Because that kind of goes in, it depends on if there's all this fill brought in, the 2 feet or more of fill, that's going to trigger that stormwater. We always highly recommend that you have an engineered stormwater plan. It's just not required for the sub 10 of a disturbance. It was designed long before I came around here to make it that I think the town wanted to have, because at the time, the town didn't have any stormwater regulations other than what the state put forth. But they felt the need to have it, but they created a kind of a simplistic way of doing it to where, yeah, if I owned a lot and I wanted to design it, there was this little one-sheeter that just kind of helped you out, and you could comply with it. It was geared more towards a subgrade system, kind of a septic style system where you just dump it in there and it just dissipates that way. But there are other documentations out there that gives calculations if instead of the subgrade, hey, I want to do a little rain garden in the backyard. Well, you can do it that way too, and if you choose your plants right, it'll soak up that stuff. So there's different avenues, but yeah, I mean, as far as the change in the code, sub 10 does not require an engineered plan, but it does require a plan. We do recommend, if you're not in this business and you're just Johnny Q homeowner, we do recommend, yeah, I would have an engineer put it together for you, but you don't have to. Does that make sense?
It does. It's, I go back to, if it's a concept we can all agree upon, which is any construction, new development should do no harm to the adjacent lot or the neighborhood with regard to stormwater runoff.
Define no harm.
Well, flooding.
Define flooding. What storm? The infinite
Let's see what
amount
has
of
to
storm?
define what a woman is, but,
No, I'd like you to define the storm event.
well,
Because we can't design for acts of God. If there's a 15-inch rainfall event, like we had, Billy, when was it? 2012, 2013, we had 15 inches of rain like an hour, and it flooded NC 24 between Jacksonville and here.
Yeah.
There's like 8 foot of water over. You're going to get flooded. It's going to happen.
Yeah, I think
Everybody's house at some point in the world of the earth being here is going to be flooded. So, and it sounds like I'm being a jerk about it, but when do we say is enough's enough? Like, do you think that 99% of all anticipated rainfalls is a requirement, or is 90, or is 95? We can't simply say that we can't 100% make sure that we're not going to adversely impact our neighbor. Because if you have a hurricane and the entire island is flooded, well, who caused it? God caused it, right? Or whoever creates hurricanes or whatever. So where is it that we draw the line? We can't say you can't do harm, because at some point, every development is going to cause harm downstream. It's just, and that's where the state government's come in with the coastal stormwater rules and said, over 12%, you have to design for the pre-post 1 year, 24-hour rainfall event, which is 3.67 inches currently. So they're not even saying that a development with a 10-inch rainfall event is to do no harm to the downstream neighbor.
Okay, good point. So we need to set boundaries, limits.
Absolutely. We can't just say a free-for-all, zero runoff from your lot. That is impossible. It's what Chris was saying, that there, you know, we have to, how did you put it, with the ordinance has to have a certain level of design limitations. We can't just.
Kind of a balance.
You have to have balance. You can't go unlimited. So I just want to make that very clear from an engineer side of things with hydrology. There's always going to be a storm where my house is going to affect my neighbors on both sides. There's no way to there's no way to prevent that. The ordinance says the majority of the events, the ordinance currently says 2 inches.
Right.
So we need boundaries, but whatever that boundary is, CAMA or state, or you mentioned something, NOAA.
We already have an ordinance
It sets
to
those
cover
boundaries.
that. It sets
it's-
the boundaries.
It's below that ordinance,
Yeah, but
but
that,
we need consistency of application of the stormwater plan, which I don't feel like we have today below 10,000 square feet. It's recommended, but not required.
Maybe you need to go and look at some of these job sites and how we're doing it, and maybe you will find out what we're doing. I mean, we are all licensed contractors that is doing this work over here, and we go put these systems in. I mean, they work, and
Well,
I don't know where you're saying that we need to make it harder. I mean, I know somebody just built something next to your house, but we do this every day, and
Yeah, I know, and
I don't-
that was a licensed contractor and built many houses on the island, and had a stormwater plan, and still didn't do 3-sides berm, and elevated the house, elevated the lot, elevated the driveway, and the grade from the driveway, which is roughly half the front yard, drains to my property with a 1-inch rain.
yeah.
I have, I have an inch of water on top of the ground that I didn't used to have, that I now have since that lot got constructed. And there was a stormwater plan. I don't know that it was followed to, I'm no expert, so I've got an open mind by all means. But I go, even with the best of plans and the best of intention, the result was harm. And I'm still fighting it. I'm still trying to get it corrected, and it's a simple correction, just to your point. A berm is all that's needed. 8-inch berm, 6-inch, 10-inch berm. What they did was they leveled it out with downward grade. What they called a berm was pine straw on top of flat sand. And the first 1-inch rain washed out the side of the berm. And I was back to, being harmed. My yard was the runoff path for my neighbor's new constructed lot. And unfortunately what happened is the contractor and developer were made some effort to remedy the situation, and then they sold the property and went, no longer my problem. So now I'm dealing with a new homeowner who looks at me and goes, huh? I have no idea what you're talking about. Doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, he might not know what you're talking about.
But that was with a stormwater plan.
Yeah.
Even with a stormwater plan,
Yeah.
which was a good plan, I just don't think the execution of the plan went well. In most, 3/4 of the lot, perfect. But that 1/4 of the front yard is where I had a problem from day one of site development. And it never got remedied.
Yeah.
It got changed and altered and,
Well, hopefully
It got
you can
worse
get that
then.
fixed and everything will be straightened out for you. But I can tell you, the majority of the systems that go in over here are done right. And you're gonna have a few that aren't right, but,
well, we've got,
you have that, I mean, but you don't, I'm gonna say this, like I said it a year or two ago over here in a meeting. Everybody that drives down Emerald Drive out here is not speeding. You can't give all of them tickets. So you gotta have ordinances and hoping your people will follow ordinances, and if they don't, then you need to do something to them if they don't follow the ordinance. But you don't make the ordinance stricter when the people aren't speeding. I mean, so I think we have a very good ordinance. I think when the forefathers set up the ordinances on this island, I think they did a great job. It used to be 45% natural. Now it's 35% natural. You look at Atlantic Beach, you look at Cape Carter, they have no ordinance at all for any kind of grading. You go over there, you cut every tree off the lot. So Emerald Isle, a lot of people come here because it's nice, but the forefathers set all that up in the beginning. Richard Stanley is an attorney. I mean, they had all these ordinances set up. I was on the planning board 20 years ago for 15 years, and all these things were in there then. And you have a little bit of a problem with your house and your lot. And I think the builder will easily come back and tell them, and they'll fix that. But the town doesn't have as much problems as what you're thinking on stormwater, is all I'm trying to tell you. And I think the ordinance are sufficient for that. Emerald has a lot of groundwater problems. Just think about that. That's what this study will tell you.
well, we have groundwater problems that show themselves when we have stormwater runoff.
When we have a storm.
And we can't do anything about the groundwater problem.
Nope.
That's pump. So the only option we have left is stormwater management. Groundwater is kind of like an act of God, is the way it is. But,
I'll show you. Anytime you want to go look at the jobs, I'll take you around and show you how it's being done.
I'm open. My thought is with 560 sub 10,000 lots is what we're looking at for the future. And if we don't want to make matters worse, this town has to try to remedy existing groundwater and stormwater problems, which they're doing over time. And in the meantime, we can't go do no harm within boundaries. We don't want to create new problems or make existing problems worse. So I go back to a motto of do no harm. I think I mean, I believe you that you do it right. And it sounds like you've got a strong conviction of being a good builder and a good stormwater manager. But there are over 25 builders on the island, and new builders coming in all the time. I don't know if they have the same, sorry, losing my voice, same degree of discipline or intent, goodwill intent. And Chris, and you've got one staff.
I have, well, I've got me and Greg, who also serves as IT for the town, but we just recently were transitioning.
1.5, 1.5 FT.
Well, we got a new person. We're transitioning administrative assistant to full-time, and probably 75 to 80% of that individual's duties will be planning. So we're beefing up a little bit in our staffing, but it is still chaotically limited.
So it's certainly not enough resources to do all the oversight, review, inspection. I mean, you got a lot on your plate. So I think we either have to staff up or we have to beef up our code. And it has to address below 10,000, which I don't think today it does. In order to be able to say going forward, we don't make matters worse, we do no harm.
So,
Within limits.
Again, it
Boundaries,
does.
whatever those boundaries are.
I don't want to have it misconstrued. It does address sub 10. Every development has to have let me word it this way. Every development that has at least 1,000 square feet of impervious coverage will have to have a stormwater plan. The divide is if it exceeds 10,000 square feet of land disturbance, it's considered a large and it's required to be engineered. If it's less than 10,000, developer can put it together, homeowner can put it together, surveyor can put it together. Those dealing with land clearing can put it together. We just have to ensure that that 2-inch rainfall is captured. So all of them do have a stormwater plan that has 1,000 square feet or more of impervious coverage. So I just want to make sure that's clear that there is a plan requirement for all that to show that capture. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I'm just, the plan can be put together by anybody.
Correct.
I can put together a plan.
That is
And I have
correct.
no experience, no qualifications, no education in that regard.
You have to do it correctly. I mean, he's gonna check it when you bring it in here. It's
Yeah.
not just a willy-dilly.
It's 1.5 full-time equivalent personnel and willy-nilly plans versus a professional engineered plan, which from the get-go is,
I don't think you understand how simple this 2 inches of stormwater is, okay? I mean, if somebody was to show it to you, it's very simple, all right? You got 2 inches of stormwater, and you gotta put it in the ground, or you gotta put it on top of the ground, or you gotta put it in a basin, okay? That's what you gotta do, and it goes into the ground. That's what we accomplish, and he checks it before we put it in, and he checks it after we put it in to make sure that it's doing right. And I just had an engineer do to the last house I did, and I did the same exact plan I've been doing for 30 years, 20 years, ever since they've had it over here. And he engineered it, and it's the same plan that we've always used. It's very simple.
So I will say this as far as staff, because essentially it's me and Greg. If we can't make sense of the plan, we send it back with instructions. All right, you need to give us X, Y, Z. And that project does not move forward until we get adequate information for the stormwater. So we do have, it's not the quickest process, but, you know, we tell folks our goal is 24-hour turnaround once we get all the adequate information, all the completed application. If we get a stormwater plan that us laymen, because we're not engineers, can't make sense of, we send it back. Or if it's not including because now granted, before, and I blame it on all the transition of this position that I sit in right now, and that's that normal, mistakes are going to happen in different transitions where you've got one director here, and then you have the interim come in to just fill in, and I think we've used a firm that's just not in Emerald Isle, so it's just, you got to learn, hopefully you get it right, you bring someone in, another rotation. There was mistakes that happened in there, I can go ahead and guarantee you that.
there's one.
There was mistakes that happened in that whole process, I can guarantee you that occurred, because that's just natural. That when you have that much turmoil in a position, something is going to go astray. the system we have now, adjusted with the code changes back to what we had in March, we've got it down to a science to where if we get it with a seal from an engineer, hey, look, that's great. We don't even have to look at that because the engineer's already done all the crunching for that and come up with it. But if it's a homeowner or if it's a developer, someone who can't seal the documents, yeah, we look at it. If we can replicate it and show that it's 2-inch capacity on site, it's approved. If we can't, you need to add this. I mean, I can show you some of the emails we send out, and it comes with a laundry list of honeydews for us to review before we can issue a permit. That give a better understanding on kind of what how the department.
I think what Billy is saying, and Warren, it's not that hard.
No, I mean, you can ask
So,
Ethan, he's an engineer, and he, when we go to the engineers to get these small lots and stuff engineered, it's like, they tell me, it's like, why are you guys doing this? I mean, you can do it simply yourself. You don't need us to do this. They want to work on something that they have to engineer. This stuff is very simple, and it's just formulas to hold the water. And so it takes, what we're having a problem with as builders is it would take us 2 weeks to get our survey, and then it would go to the engineer to engineer the plan and everything, and it would take them a month to do it. So we're looking at a month and a half to 2 months to be able to turn it into Chris, and then Chris might take 3 or 4 days. And so we're going into 60 days to start building the house. And, you know, 30 days is a very good timeline.
Unacceptable.
Yeah, 60 days or 90 days is way too long, and there's just not enough engineers around here to do that, and there's no other towns making people, builders, get engineers like that. I mean, it's...
So the survey happens regardless.
Oh, yeah, the survey, yeah, everything is put on the survey. Yeah.
You go to survey, so
Yeah.
2 weeks. Why does an engineer take 30 days to?
Because they're busy.
Everybody's busy.
Pardon?
Everybody's busy. Billy, I think Final Shores and Atlantic Beach require engineer plans.
Yeah, yeah,
Both
Final
of those
Shores,
towns do.
yeah, Final Shores now, but there's a lot of other areas that don't. And it's,
So where did the 10,000, the magic 10,000 come from?
that's from the state.
Is it?
Yeah. It's the state. It's the
Does it
state.
really apply, or is it just something that got?
10,000 square feet, when you disturb more than 10,000 feet or acre. I mean, that's
10,000 for the state is a BUA requirement that triggers a stormwater permit for an overall large development.
Yeah,
I don't know where 10,000 came from. That was just some random.
maybe some
number.
people have, got
Okay.
that in there somehow.
My assumption.
Yeah, it's
would
an
be-
acre.
My assumption would be that 75 to 80% of the lots that have been platted on Emerald Isle are less than, 10 to 12, 14,000 square foot, because there's really, like Billy said, there's no need in an engineer drawing a stormwater plan for a 12,500 square foot lot that has less than 5 foot of relief from any corner. There's nothing to engineer. There's no retaining walls, there's no fill, there's no grading, there's very little structure that needs to be placed on the lot. So that's where I would imagine, we could probably talk to some of the older planning board members and see what happened and why the 10,000 square foot was there. Because these smaller lots, these lots that are less than 10,000 square foot of disturbance don't need an engineer unless there is some extenuating circumstance. Like the lot on Ridge Road that has probably 20 foot of relief, if not more, from left to right on a 75-foot lot. That's gonna have to have an engineer. You're gonna have to have a 10-foot retaining wall, which by the state's requirement, you have to have an engineer to engineer anything over 5 feet. So all these small lots that are cookie cutters, I could name off 20 right off the top of my head. You can't really mess up the stormwater, I mean, all these cookie cutter 75 by 150 foot lots, you have to leave 35% natural anyways. There's not a lot of grade, there's not a lot of fill, there's not a lot of activity going on, so requiring contractors to go get an engineer to waste 4 to 6 weeks of time is pointless on those lots. It's just, they're gonna draw the exact same thing that a general contractor's gonna draw.
So what's our safeguard, or what's our, how do we determine through the code to delineate those no-brainer lots, you know, ready-to-go lots?
2 foot of fill
Foot of fill.
requires an engineer plan.
So the lot you said they had 75 foot of relief or 25 foot of relief?
20 to 25. That's gonna require an engineer plan, because you have to have 2 foot of fill over the course of a lot.
What happens if you just take the high side and move it to the low side?
It's not gonna happen with that lot. That lot, you need to go in the field and go see it. That would solve 99% of your questions.
2 foot
They
fill.
can't, with 35% natural area, they can't grade this lot. It's not like a sand dune. It is 20 foot of fill left to right, the whole lot. They're gonna have to bring in $20,000 worth of dirt to make this lot.
We got cold waters in that kitchen area.
Okay. Yeah, that might be a fail-safe. And if it takes care of 90+% of the lots.
The majority of the lots that are left are gonna require retaining walls, wouldn't you say, Billy? Not
Yeah,
all of them,
Yeah.
but the majority.
yeah,
And I'm not talking about redevelopment, just flat out, most of the lots that are left vacant have some form of wildness to them.
yeah,
Not all of them,
that's right. Yeah.
because that's why he didn't build them and his partners and all that didn't build them 20 years ago. Because there's no reason.
Well, a lot of the lots too, the people haven't been ready to build on yet. I mean,
Sure.
they might not be ready to build on them. So there's still a lot of nice lots in Emerald left to be built on.
So the 2 foot fill is our safeguard.
The 2 foot fill is a safeguard right now.
So
And
we've got to be real careful what we do with 2 foot fill.
well, Chris, sitting right there in the chair, he's inspecting these lots and checking to make sure that we have the 35% natural marked before we start. He's coming at the end and checking the stormwater to make sure we had the stormwater in.
And Billy, now, before you get to the end, they're enacting a policy after clearing and erosion control measures go in to come back and inspect one more time.
Well, yeah, I
So
get that.
to help that point, where you were going,
Yeah.
to help those safeguards.
Yeah,
Yeah, we're trying to create an atmosphere very similar to some of the conversations we had last meeting with just the debate on requiring a foundation survey at some point. To where once the land's cleared, we go back out, we just make sure, and as long as the natural area staking remains and it's maintained by the developer, it's a real quick, staff goes out there, yeah, I'm not seeing encroachment, we're going on to the next site.
yeah.
And what would prevent some issues like what happened during construction is if you went out and saw the clearing and grading and no silt fence put in,
Yes.
then the silt fence would have been required to be put in. That would prevent in construction off-site sedimentation or off-site channelized flow.
Yep, so the foundation survey, we do those on every house. And it's a lot better to do a foundation survey right after you do the foundation.
Yeah.
So if you guys could require it like, I don't know, 2 weeks or 3 weeks after that, you get the building permit to require a foundation survey, that's the time to catch something if something's built in a wrong area. And the county doesn't, I listened to what Ethan said last time, the county doesn't worry about it that much because the lots are bigger over there. But when you get over here on the beach, you have decks and stuff, a lot of times they encroach into the setbacks. So a foundation survey is very important over
Well,
here. And we've always used to do them. I don't know why they stopped.
It's good practice, we do require it for flood development,
Yeah.
but not anywhere else, but I think that is definitely something that can come out of this committee.
Oh, yeah.
And further, it helps out. I mean, as a builder, if you got a foundation and this survey comes in and there's encroachment, it's a lot easier for you to fix it then
Yeah.
than when you have this house on that foundation.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So,
That'd be a good thing.
All right, so we've got about 35 minutes. I will continue to roll through. Commissioner Brownlow did put together a white paper. He did a pretty good review on Cisco's project. So he composed that in this white paper. And you guys should have a copy of it. I've made sure I emailed it. So this is kind of a summary. Let me make sure, double check my presentation. Okay. So here's a further summary, and he's mimicking a lot of what Billy was saying on this. We do have also, one of the things I want to point out, we do have our pockets of clay deposits in around that low-lying areas. That just doesn't drain well. There's just, I mean, clay is still clay. But you know, he does a very good job of summarizing things on that. Sustainable solutions, best management practices, bioretention areas, the rain gardens, level spreaders, smart land use planning. I like that term. So he's got, you know, we can look at things that to include minimize impervious surfaces and vegetative controls. So those are all great ideas as this committee moves forward and makes potential adjustments to code to keep that in mind. Let's see. Trying to pick up stuff, so I want to make sure we go through this entire agenda items. All right. Other information needed for this committee. I do still have on my to-do list the visual of the vacant lots that we're working on. That'll be in a GIS map format that gives you a good idea of where these are at. And then also from last meeting, we're working on those lots that have potential for, I would call for Emerald Isle major developments. So that's these old mobile home parks that could in the next 20 years convert into single family lots, large multifamily you know, different options there. But that gives a good idea for this group to see that potential. And then we could, and this was one of the things I was thinking of, if we could just gauge a grasp on the parcels with structures built that are over 20 years old. That gives us that idea of the redevelopment aspect, especially on the ocean front. So the point on that is, again, what we're trying to gauge is 20 years in the future, and that'll give us those options on potential development. Is there anything else you guys think you need while we go down this quest that I'm missing?
I would say, well, I guess that's in the specific maps, like a GIS printout that we could overlay and see the flood-prone areas, maybe in a hatch.
Okay.
You know, in that same scale. That way, I think we already have several drawings of that, but that might help to have it all together.
Yeah, your timeline of 20 years, I think that's good, but is there a way to parse that in, say, a 10-year outlook, 5-year outlook? I'm worried that going 20 years out doesn't give us an action plan for the next 3 years, 3 to 5 years. In order to have, you know, to be where we want to be in 10 years, we got to take action tomorrow. Certainly 1 year, 2 year, 3 year. And if you design it with too big of an outlook, too far reaching of an outlook, it becomes.
But essentially what we're doing here is long-range planning in effect. And that's where usually that, and it could take place in 10 years versus 20. I mean, hell, the economy could, you know, they're starting to lower interest rates, so development could ramp up with that after the September drop. And some of these lots will get developed quicker than staff's even expected. So that crystal ball aspect, it's kind of tough to gauge it on. Could everything be built out in 10 years? Possibly.
Or just-
Will it? Probably
just-
not.
Something to think about.
Yeah.
I mean, the real, looking at the magnitude, you know, certainly the 560 lots is the highest volume. Redevelopment, I don't know if that's 25 lots or 250 lots. If it's 25, it's you know, a smaller issue than, it's harder to guesstimate redevelopment.
But you're forecasting based off trends when you're gauging what you can assume will occur in 10 years. But again, I'll put it this way. When I started Cedar Point in '06, so that's almost 20 years ago, Emerald Isle was going to be built out in no time. Emerald Isle's not built out yet. They'll go in, there'll always remain some sort of vacant lots. They'll come in, they'll redevelop some of these older ones. So that's why you try to do this holistic approach. But again, you're forecasting. You're looking at those structures that are over 20 years old. So that gives you that understanding. It'll likely either be torn down and rebuilt or refurbished to what the owner has. So you look at that as far as redevelopment. You look at some of these uses that might not survive. You know, during 06, 07, 08, there's a lot of RV parks that were converted into condo complexes, single-family dwelling, you know, so different use, different densities. So it's this whole big picture that planners have to look at. Planners, developers, engineers, the whole gamut. We look at all this stuff on trying to forecast what the future provides, but it's not as, the 10, 20-year terms are just kind of like placeholders. That gives a good description on it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. If you set your data up right, I mean, data I'm talking about, there's a physical address associated with each one of these. It's not so much a forecast as it is an inventory. And 20 years, if something's 20 years old, is it really likely to be torn down, redeveloped? Or is it more
It
like?
depends on what the climate is at that time.
Yeah. So I wonder if 30 or 40 years old might give us a more imminent.
And we can shave it down to that. That's fine. I just,
Yeah.
again,
Or
it's.
at least have the ability to take the data and manipulate it where you can
Yeah.
do 10 years, do 20, do 30.
Yeah,
So if you have a physical address, column A, column B would be date built, so we could age. So you can sort and include or exclude based on age. And the other category we talked about was God, losing my voice, sorry. Dividing a property into two properties, subdividing that.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if that's, given its magnitude, if that's worth chasing or.
Well, with those, again, if you can take one larger lot and subdivide it in lots that conform with the requirements of that zoning district, that's permissible. It still goes before the planning board, board of commissioners, and the mayor has to sign off on the plat, but you've got that minimum standards that are set in that code. And as long as that can be mimicked on both lots, it's permissible.
So I don't know if there's a way to identify those lots or not.
Whether, if you go to the GIS map, they're all on there. I mean, it's, GIS, Carteret County, you can go through there and look at the whole island, all the maps, and you can see all the parcels of land that are left and all the lots. I mean, there's just a few subdivisions where there's like 2 lots back to back. They never put a line in the middle of them because people bought both lots and they didn't want to pay taxes but on one total lot. So they waited to put those, you know, to subdivide.
Yeah.
And it's the same size lot that it was going to be when it was developed. It's just, there's other parcels where there's 6 or 7 lots in a row that the family bought those 6 or 7 and they didn't want to subdivide them. And they come back later and do it. The water company just bought 6 or 7 up here on Live Oak Street off of Live Oak, and they opted to keep them all, you know, where there's no lines in there. So that's,
Well, in the same
it's just all
notion,
over town.
we got some of these lots that were platted in the 50s. They're 7,500 square feet. And that's still buildable lot, but it's significantly less than 12.5 that's minimum all new lots. So if you have a lot and you want to create a second lot off of that, it's got to be a 12.5 lot. It cannot be that 7,500. But we still have those that are considered non-conforming lots. There's portions on our code that instruct staff on how we handle the development of those. But again, they have to develop it with this whole big picture, natural area, stormwater plan, limitations on where your septic system, you know, just, there's a lot of puzzle pieces in that one lot development.
Yeah, and those lots are different. They have 5-foot setbacks for septic, okay? There's a lot of things that run with those lots because when they developed those lots, things were different. You know, the rules were different. So when you got a 7,000 square foot subdivision, which is kind of like over there by Blue Water, all those lots up there towards the ocean front are all like 75 by, they're like 7,100 square feet. They're not that big, 75 by 100. So all the different rules that run with those lots, you don't want to take those away from people because they won't ever be able to build on those lots. They're not big enough. So
Yeah.
they kind of all run with it. But then now they still have to follow the 35% rule. They still have to follow the stormwater rule. So that's going to keep all those lots, when people develop those, it's going to keep them where they are kind of small. So are you worried about those? Because, I don't know, it kind of protects itself.
Yeah, but
If that's where you're going with it, I
it'll
mean,
limit,
it's kind of,
you'll have, so on those lots, especially the closer it gets to the ocean, they're gonna want as much square footage they can, but it's very limited with all these other puzzle pieces too there. And to include height restrictions, we do have height restrictions, so you're not gonna get, the biggest I've seen in Emerald Isle is right there near the Black Skimmer access. It's a 10,000 square foot home, but it meets code. He fit it on there. It's jammed in there, but he fit it on there. So,
is that the one on the ocean front?
yes.
Right in front of Black Skimmer to the right?
Yeah, you got the access, you got the duplex, and then there's that.
Yeah.
The owner's actually, I guess he's doing his own general contracting on there.
Building himself.
Any other?
Thanks. You know, not
Sir?
to belabor that, but just looking for the ability to parse 10 years, 5, 10, 15, 20. So in your
So-
data, that your, address, physical address, built.
We can do, here's what staff's intent is on that, is to give some visual references. I think, if I'm hearing you right, some of the greater detail gets in these larger comprehensive plans that take 1 to 2 years to put together. I don't think that's what the instructions were for this committee as far as that. I think we can provide statistical data. Hey, look, be it 20 years old, be it 30 years old, here's your current inventory of 30-plus-year-old structures.
Perfect.
And that'll give you that idea of, we know how many vacant lots. We know some of these larger potential redeveloped areas, mobile parks, whichever. But that also give you that idea, we've got this handful of lots in Emerald Isle that in the next 5 to 10 years could likely get torn down and redeveloped into something different that we're already seeing right now.
Yeah, it's gonna be hard to do, but I think the data will give us the best ability to look forward 5 years and say where future problems going to be.
Okay.
And we go, if you develop one house on that street, or that section of a street, no problem. But if all 6 are built, then we've got a downhill flooding
Okay.
of, not an adjacent lot, but maybe a neighbor's lot a block away.
Okay.
So that's kind of what I'm trying to drive towards is where the future problems going to be. And then step 2 would be, well, what can we do now? What code or ordinance or planning can we put into effect to avoid that?
All right.
So I think Matt's he likes to say he's got a spreadsheet with 180 problem areas.
The hot spots, yes.
How do we keep that spreadsheet from, continue to get smaller, not get bigger or stay the same?
Well,
One gets solved, but another one takes its place.
some of those hot spots, though, are just when there weren't codes in the development. It was just how it was developed back in, let's say, some of these spots were developed in the 70s, and
Yeah, they may be
we
hoping.
likely didn't even have any regulations, so it is not uncommon for towns to find these hot spots, pursue grant funding to fix it, so where it's not a hot spot anymore. So some of those aren't attributed to any stormwater concerns other than poor design back in the 70s, if that makes any sense. Or I would say, I would use that term lightly because it was designed per code back then. It was probably poor code versus poor design. Because it was not, in 1970, the folks gauging the development in Emerald Isle, I guarantee never thought it would blossom to what it is now. I mean, I've seen it in 20 years just explode. So,
One more thing you maybe can add to that is if I've talked to somebody and they told me that, are most of these calls, are they about, water on the road in front of their house? Or if you go down to the next one, is it water underneath the person's house? Or is it water in the person's house? I mean, I think you need to kind of look at it, in like 3 different levels,
Yeah.
When it's in the person's house, there's a big problem.
yes.
If it's out on the road in front of their house, not really a big issue if it's going away. If it's there for a week, it's stormwater. If it's there for 8 hours, it's probably not stormwater.
Right.
If it's in your yard, that's a problem, but is it a real big problem? I mean, if it's going away after, 8 hours, it's just going, I have places in my yard, I get a 4 foot of stormwater because I got one area in my yard where all the water goes. But after 3 or 4 hours, it's gone.
Yeah.
So, you got to kind of gauge these things on you know, how this problem is A, B, or C? You know,
Yeah.
the C, we need to start with the C. We got a problem with the C. You know, the B, it ain't as big a problem, and the A, it probably isn't a problem at all.
Yeah, exactly.
So, you know, that's, you know, some of these people, Roy told me when he worked at CAMA, they went out and did a big campaign and educated a lot of people about CAMA things behind people's houses with docks and things like that, and what all the rules were. And, you know, some of these people, you know, education goes a long way on telling them that if it's stormwater, or if it's just groundwater, or if it's, you know, a problem. Because, I mean, it takes a lot of time for the town to answer all these three issues, you know? You know, I'm not saying that some people don't have really bad problems with stormwater coming in their house and them rocks, they do. But are all these complaints, you know, C?
I would honestly say, I'd say majority, maybe 65% to 70% are the flooding on the road, flooding on the lot, that does not affect the home. But that still leaves a fairly large percentage that we've seen some encroachment into the home. But on that same notion, I guess realistically, we got to look at what type of event occurred where that flooding made it to the home. And that's where we've got to do a hell of a balancing act as staff to just figure out what is a code violation or what is not.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I agree. That's,
all right, so we're down to 15. Let's to try to get that's the updated future meeting schedule. The Board of Commissioners did narrow it down to once a month versus twice a month. So you're looking at September the 19th, October the 17th, November the 7th, and December the 5th. And that's just for this calendar year. We reserve the right if you guys need to meet similar schedule in 25. You know, it's a 12-month cycle for this committee that the Board of Commissioners set up. So it's not saying, you know, we started this in August, we can end it in 25 if needed. So,
I'm gonna have to leave a little bit early on September 19th. I have a board meeting at my house, and I'm gonna have to leave probably about 4.
okay.
So, but I don't think we need to change the meeting just for
Okay.
that, but.
October 17th and November 7th, both those Thursdays, I have a conflict.
Okay.
Is there a way we could move that to the Tuesday of that week?
If everybody's
Yeah,
fine
I
with
was
that,
just
yeah.
seeing if everybody could do that.
Yeah, and I can check the availability.
One of them is a Rotary event.
Okay. So we're looking at,
A fishing tournament, yeah.
Nice and easy slid in there. Rotary event.
Chris,
I got you.
I'm having a Rotary board meeting at my house.
are you saying we're only gonna meet once a month?
correct. That was per the Board of Commissioners in they had a special meeting, was it last Friday, I think? And they adjusted the schedule with the adjustment on their representative to serve on this board.
So we were gonna meet on October 17th. We will move that to the 15th.
If
If possible.
that's okay with everybody else, I mean,
Yeah.
That's fine with me.
so. And then what about the November 7th meeting? Is everybody okay shifting it to Tuesday versus Thursday of that same week?
November,
5th is election day. That's,
That-
over there.
Yeah, that's over there.
I'll be working it.
is there any way that we can go maybe to like the 14th of November?
I'm gonna be out of town that whole week.
Yeah, I'm gonna be out of town the other week, but.
Yeah, I'll be in Hawaii.
can we maybe move it to,
The 19th or 21st?
yeah, the 21st? We already have one on the 21st, so, yeah, we had one on the 21st.
I think we had one and it just took
Can we
it
move
out.
it to the 21st that month?
That's okay with
Works out
everybody?
better for me.
Yep.
All right, so
That
we'll
good
just
one?
keep that one then.
Okay.
And we're gonna get rid of the one on the 7th. November, we already did that.
Okay. All right,
And then what does it say for December? What was it on?
December 5th.
December 5th? Yeah,
Yeah,
that's good for me.
Keep in mind, my intention, I think I sent out a calendar invite for the twice a month. I'll adjust that.
Okay.
And send it back out.
That's good for me.
All right, we're down to 10 minutes. Any comments that we didn't already cover today? And I will say, in either let me back up real quick. The site visits, if we can manage it, I'm looking on either the September meeting or October meeting to do the field trip.
Okay.
So,
Let it cool off some.
so, any comments from the committee?
I don't
Since
have-
we're going to a once a month meeting, do we want to take our talk time and do we want to set a different date for the site visit?
That's up to you guys.
I mean, we're only meeting once a month. I guess it depends on what we hope to accomplish and how quick. Are we looking at the end of 12 months, having recommendations, or?
Yeah, that's the instructions by the commissioners is this committee is for a period of 12 months. And, you know, I read that as have recommendations to the planning board on or before that time period. If there are any recommendations, if you guys go through everything and say, hey, Chris, there's no changes, anything's possible, but yeah, your time limit is that 12-month cycle.
Chris, do you have any minutes from the previous committee that did, what was it, BDO or
Oh,
that met on the stormwater rules that they changed a few of them and some of them we had changed back? Do you have the meeting minutes and stuff from those?
possibly? I'll have to check.
I mean, Matt at the last meeting said that he, you know, the other committee talked about a lot of these things. We could kind of get a gist of
Not
what they
try to
said.
reinvent the wheel, yeah. Okay, that's a good idea.
Yeah, but
Okay. Maybe there's something that we're not thinking of that they did, so,
yeah.
okay. All right, any other comments? Everybody ready to adjourn? All right, guys.
We're ready.
Thank you for your time today, and, again, like I said, with this new stuff, new schedule, I'm gonna do a calendar invite, so that should be forthcoming.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.